Hi, this is Kaushik, and
And I'm Deepti.
yeah, so Deepti and I are good friends, and we've been friends for around 2, 3 years, and we thought, we'd start a fun activity over the weekend. And Deepti, would you like to tell them more about it?
Yeah, so before we get into anything, a quick disclaimer would be that we don't claim to represent the whole queer community or the Indian queer community as a whole. We're just voicing our personal opinions and from what we gather from our experience.
Yeah, and as two queer individuals who have interacted and spoken about a lot of issues that affect both of us at a personal level, as well as um, other, community related issues, we thought we should start this, podcast. And we also understand that, following Deepti's disclaimer, that we are privileged in a lot of ways, both of us, um, in terms of caste privileges as well as social and economic privileges. So we'd like to acknowledge this as well before we start off with anything else.
So again, as the title suggests, most of the conversations will be around queer topics, which can range from domestic violence to movies to support spaces. But first things first, do you want to explain why we're doing this, Kaushik?
Yes. Uh, so as I mentioned earlier, like Ditya and I are quite close, and we have interacted at a personal level as well as in the community level over the last 2, 3 years in Bangalore. We both currently stay in Bangalore. We have different backgrounds. I am from Bangalore, and Deepti is from Andhra, and she has very close connections to Chennai as well. Yeah, so we're just two normal queer people who want to put our voices across and have conversations about queer experiences we've had in our life. This can range from personal opinions, personal experiences to general stuff. Okay, so whatever affects us, as queer individuals.
Yeah, so just adding to that, I have been listening to podcasts for about a couple of years now, on and off, and I've always craved for Indian content in terms of queer perspective because, with a queer perspective, because most of the things that I find online, except for one or two, are predominantly US based, whether it's a YouTube video or a podcast as such, which almost miss that Indian cultural layer, which of course they don't have it, they don't see it, content from US. So that Indianness in the queer space was what was missing, and that's one of the main reasons. Apart from what Kaushik had mentioned, that's one of the main reasons why I want to do this. I want to do a podcast to get more voices into the queer space, Indian queer space.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with Deepthi over there with the points that she's made, and we feel and then at the end of the day, it's nice to put our voices across, and even if we are doing it just for our sake, right? So we shall be choosing a range of topics as we go. We don't have any specific agenda, and like we said, we're just going to choose topics ad hoc and topics which are close to us, like for example, queer media, support spaces, body image issues, then the dating culture, etc. So yeah, and Deepti, do you have any other
Yeah.
topics in mind?
No, we'll add them as we get ideas.
Yeah, I mean then that should be. I mean it should be pretty organic growth. Yeah.
Yeah. So today, because it's like the second anniversary of 377, IPC 377 reading down, we want to talk a little bit about that and also our personal experiences around the day the verdict
Mm.
happened. So
Ye-
yeah.
Yeah. So, uh, Deepti, could you tell us a bit about what the actual verdict was and why it was read down and some salient details about it?
So as the law, it is basically, I'm reading out the exact thing, which is, it's IPC 377 basically criminalizes carnal intercourse against the nature of order with any man, woman, or animal. So this is something that was introduced to IPC in the 1860s by
Oh
the
God, it's from the
Britishers.
1860s. I mean, that's the Victorian age. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the Queen gave it to us.
Hmm.
So this uh, this is not just if you're gay or, I mean, it doesn't talk about lesbians. That's a whole different thing because, of course, women's sexuality is never considered as important or almost invisible, but mainly talks about men and with a heterosexual within heterosexual couples as well. This there is a layer there also because carnal intercourse basically is only when a penis and a vagina are involved, which eventually is to produce kids. So anything apart from that is basically what it criminalizes. So when you look at heterosexual couples, it criminalizes oral and anal sex. So it's not that technically it is not something that only applies to homosexual individuals. It also applies to, on huge level to heterosexual couples as well. But this law has been mostly used to harass people.
Yeah.
And although everything is consensual.
I know. So like you said, the purview of the law doesn't restrict it to be targeting only homosexuals or queer folk. I mean, it can span across spectrums. But the problem is 377 was primarily used as a mean to politically, socially, economically, emotionally isolate and target queer people from a long time. And it is basically very unfair. It was pretty unfair in a lot of ways because queer people were singled out for this. And I don't need to specifically talk about those horrible scams and the horror stories that queer men have been subjected to on the dating apps. I'm talking about queer men because of my experiences talking to queer men and my own couple of experiences a few years ago. And the interesting thing is a lot of these things still continue to happen in different forms. But so that's about it. And that's
I think just to add to it, one of the actually just to add to that gay men part is that whatever horror stories gay men go through, I'm guessing only 10% of it actually comes out, right? As
definitely,
word of mouth or in support spaces. So I think the lack of stories around women is only because they're not out. I don't think they're not happening. They're probably happening, but the oppression doesn't let you speak about it, right?
I know. And there is so much stigma and shame that still exists around this. But like we discussed, the verdict definitely initiated certain changes. And in our talk, we would like to kind of examine them later. But Deepthi, could you tell us a bit more about the actual verdict?
So the actual verdict is that unanimously all 5 judges have said that it's unconstitutional. That is, 377 is unconstitutional. The fact that it criminalizes consensual sexual conduct between 2 adults of the same sex is a very wrong thing. A lot of beautiful things had happened in the judgment, and there was a point where one of the judges had said history owes an apology. To people who have suffered. That's one among the many brilliant points that was.
And the document itself is so beautifully written. If anyone wants to check it out, the language is pretty simple. There are some legal jargon, but it mostly reads very nicely. And we were surprised ourselves when we read the judgment. It was so it was so beautifully worded. And Deepthi, who are the 5 judges on the panel?
So it was Deepak Mishra and Chandrachud, Indu Malhotra, and who are the people?
Kanvilkar, I think. A.M. Kanvilkar. If my pronunciation is not wrong. Yeah.
And Arif Nariman. So Nariman. So one last thing I would want to add before we move on to the next topic, next section is that it's a very common misconception that people believe that being gay is crime. So that's absolutely not the case. But then, of course, being gay itself, if it is criminalized, it's only because of the people who use the law to harass you. but the actual literature only says that the act, which again, like explained earlier, it doesn't matter if you're heterosexual, homosexual. If a heterosexual couple has oral sex, they are seen as criminal as per the law. So, and again, the point that I want to strongly say is that being gay was never crime. It's the society that made it, look like that. But then the actual law states that only the act is criminalized.
I got a lot of congratulatory messages on the verdict day from a lot of my friends saying that, it's finally legal. I asked them what's legal, and they're like, no, you can be gay and proud. I'm like, that wasn't illegal even before. So, no, but you also, of course, it could be, there are a lot of reasons why people might assume this, and we hope with time, people also get educated, and this probably why we are also doing this, though this is not our only goal. So, yeah. So coming to the actual day of the verdict, Deepti, do you remember what you did? And this was exactly 2 years ago, right?
Yeah. So do you want to? You had a quite interesting day. Do you want
Actually,
to go first?
I did. It's like one of the most defining moments of my life, and so to the people who are listening, I was out to most people around me, including my family, except my father, of course. That's the main talking point of this discussion today. My sister, my cousins, and then all my friends, a couple of workplace colleagues. Even by then, by 2018, September 6th itself, I'd come out to a lot of people and I'd been actively participating in events, but I'd put off coming out to my father for the longest time. So what we did is, on the day I remember, so I used to attend classes at the Alliance Francaise, Bangalore, and one of my friends called me up, and then he was like I used to attend a morning class, 7 to 9, and he called me up and said, hey dude, Alliance is pretty close to ALF. ALF is the Alternative Law Forum in Bangalore, and it's quite well known for the work that they do in ranging across a lot of issues. Right, Deepti?
Yeah.
And so he called me and he's like, let's go. I'm like, okay, let me just go and see. So we went to the ALF, and wow, that was a sight to behold. So in the main chamber of the ALF, the ALF had put up a projector, basically, which was connected to, I think, NDTV or one of the popular news channels, basically counting down the time to the verdict, and the room was filled with people I knew and filled with people I didn't know, people ranging across, people from different spectrum, people who identified as people who identified as gay, people who identified as trans, and people identified as genderqueer. And I never seen such a vibrant setting before, apart from Pride, of course. Pride is a different ballgame altogether, but in a room, sitting, waiting with bated breath, I saw a few couples who were holding hands and sitting together and looking very anxious. That was such a nice sight to see. They were holding hands, and the atmosphere before the verdict actually came out was a bit tense. So there was cautious optimism, and there was cautious optimism that the verdict would definitely be in favor. And one of the legal experts was telling us, we are sure 3 or 4 of the judges would pass this out of the total 5, right? But when the verdict came out, and of course, when you talk about the Indian Standard Time, we were all expecting it at around, I hope I'm not getting the time wrong, it's supposed to be out at 11, but it came out only officially at 11:40 or 11:45, and they said it was a unanimous verdict. All 5 of the judges on the chair basically struck down the verdict, and that was what was the most exciting part, because people were like, wow, we didn't expect a unanimous verdict. And the atmosphere changed from a quiet, cautious, optimistic atmosphere with some anxiety to one of jubilation and joy. People were crying, and some people were crying out in joy. And I was talking to a gentleman sitting next to me, and he was like, I've been waiting for this for years. And then he told me that he'd been with his partner for 18 years in Bangalore, and
Wow.
And they were looking so happy. And at that point of time, I was out in the community for around 2 years, 2.5 years.
Hmm.
And for me to see this, and realize what a big deal it was for them was definitely,
Right.
especially someone who had lived through, relatively worse times or darker times,
Right.
and it was such a eye-opening experience. And so from the ALF, we all decided to go to town hall,
Hmm.
waving flags. You should see there was a huge procession of people from ALF to town hall. They're not exactly nearby. There's quite some
Right.
walking to do. In the middle of the day, this was around at 12 o'clock, broad daylight, like people with
As
flags.
big as Pride celebration, I
Yeah,
say.
a smaller version of Pride, but definitely more vibrant
Okay.
and jubilant. Like,
Right.
yeah, and then town hall. It was blazing because September and October is pretty hot in Bangalore.
Right.
It's almost equivalent to summer. It was blazing hot at around 12:20 in the town hall. So we all reached there, and then I was with a couple of friends, and it was like we were all so happy, and more people joined us there. And
Hmm.
town hall is situated in the middle of, basically, you could call it one of the most prime localities in Bangalore. Had such
Hmm.
visibility, and you had all these colorful people waving flags, dancing, beating drums. And then
Hmm.
a couple of folk artists had also been called. I remember the drummers.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, and then members across the spectrum, like some of the trans people, then genderqueer people, then lesbians, gays. Everyone was just dancing around, and such a
Hmm.
sight to see. And we saw then some sneaky cameras.
Okay.
The camera sneaked in one by one, and
Hmm.
then I just noticed it to the corner of my eye, and then I realized, okay, it's not a big deal. And then after a while, like within 10 minutes, there were like media vans all over.
Oh God. Okay.
Media vans all over. And I still did not, like, one of my friend pointed out saying that, we might get recorded on TV. And I said, we might be recorded and then telecast on TV. And then I said,
Hmm.
no, it's okay. My dad doesn't watch news anyway. Like, my dad's pretty, he just kind of minds his own business. He's not really interested in worldly affairs too.
Okay.
He just, like, work is worship for him. So I thought it's okay. My dad's never going to see it. Like, so, yeah. So, and
Hmm.
then we celebrated, we had fun, and then we went home and then refreshed ourselves. And then, Deepti, you remember? I called you then.
Yeah, yeah, with
And
the media and everything. You wanted me to come, but I was somewhere. I was actually at work, and I was like, I wanted to come, but then I was
I'd even
like,
sent
I'm
you the
not at home.
location. I'd even sent you the location saying
Yeah,
that this is
I
town hall,
remember.
come. And you were like in half minds because you were also busy with work. And I think you were a bit more, I would say, cautious because of the cameras. You had already warned me then, like, be careful. Like,
See, that's my general thing in Pride March also. I attend Pride March, but I'm always wary of phones and cameras. So, I've still ended up going to 4 or 5 Prides.
mm.
But yeah, I'm a little cautious at this. I was like, okay, I'm at work. I can't take too long off from work also. So I stayed at work. So yeah, you go on.
Yeah, then in the evening, I guess both of us met along with a bunch of other friends. We met at
Yeah,
the Good As You support group we
good
go
idea.
to. And it was
Yeah,
luckily on that day, like Thursday evenings, Good As You meet, 7 to 9
regular.
at Swabhava. And the verdict came out on Thursday. It was such a coincidence. And usually they have
Yeah.
around 15 to 20 people on an average.
Hmm.
And that day there were 85. There were
Yeah, I
85
remember.
people jam-packed. It was such a, amazing experience. Could you tell us more, Deepthi, like about it?
No, I think my thing was, I made sure I go to mostly, almost all the time, whenever possible, I go to Good As You. It's a happy space for me because that's kind of like my queer space in Bangalore since I moved about 2, 3 years back. So,
Mm.
like you said, every time I would see just like, 20, maximum I've seen was probably 30 people on like a random day. But then that day, it was completely full and people were standing outside, people were standing down. And I think we were lucky we went in at 7 and we were like, talking about the judgment and so excited that it was like all the judges, you know, reading
Yeah,
it
I mean,
down
the
and all of them
unanimous verdict
agreeing.
was like definitely the icing on a cake because, as I said, most
Yeah,
people expected three or four of the judges to pass it, but they didn't
right.
expect the entire bench to unanimously pass it, and that was the like the
That was like the icing on the cake, like you
yeah,
said.
that was icing on the cake, and there were so many people inside in that particular meeting, around 80, 85 people, and then we
Yeah.
were all like jubilant, basically. Yeah, of course, there were also some prescient people who were like, this is not the end of the road, and a lot more
True,
needs to
true.
be done. Yeah.
I mean, I think that is something we all need to acknowledge because just changing the law doesn't change the society, right?
Mm.
And society's attitude towards whatever change it is, whether it's decriminalizing suicide, uh, or attempt to suicide, sorry, decriminalizing attempt to suicide, or in our case, decriminalizing
Mm.
consensual sex between same-sex adults, whatever
Mm.
it is. So for the society's attitude to change towards it, I think at least will take 10 years from the time of the judges.
I
So
know, I know,
there is
and
decent amount of work right now being done, but then not the end of the day, maybe not the end of the world. We have a lot of work to do.
I know, I know. And coming back to this, so the day was so long for me. I had class from 7 to 9, and then I went to town hall, and then we were dancing around
Hmm.
in the sun and captured by basically every major media house that had come there to to
Hmm.
witness our celebration. And I didn't
Hmm.
acknowledge it initially. Then we went to the support group. We had more fun there, and definitely I felt proud because as I mentioned earlier, I was only into the community for 2.5 years. But then through these events, attending
Right.
ALF and the town hall celebrations, and then coming back
Hmm.
to the Good as You meeting, where there were like people who had been their experiences were so poignant, like people who had
Yeah.
been active in the community for 18, 20 years, what it meant to them. I mean, I finally understood on that day, like, yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, then of course all the TV channels started beaming uh, these very vibrant, colorful images, and then I was so clearly seen. And I was right about the fact that my dad wouldn't watch it. My dad definitely didn't
Hmm.
watch it, but I forgot to factor in the annoying relatives, the annoying friends he had. And then he started getting calls that night at around 11
Oh
o'clock saying
God.
that we saw your son on TV. We saw your son on
Hmm.
TV, and it was pretty bad. And one of his friends told him that your son is dancing with hijras on TV. I'm like, what? Yeah.
Oh
So I
shit.
didn't know this. My dad told my sister this. Yeah.
Hmm.
And then the next day when I get up, my sister like he knows. Yeah. So
Hmm.
I'm like, what should I do? Should I be in denial about it? And because up till that point of time, he was basically the only person that I cared about, who I did
Hmm.
not reveal my sexuality yet.
Hmm.
And of course, because my equation with my father has always been complicated. I mean, there is definitely a lot of love
Hmm.
and affection, but it's not a very linear kind of equation. We
Right. Right.
struggle we struggle on a lot of things, and to meet halfway itself, it takes so much effort on a lot of issues.
Hmm.
So I was in denial, and I remember Deepti gave me advice. She initially said just be in denial about it. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah.
And
Deepti,
then.
Deepti he, told me, and a lot of other friends said, just say that you're celebrating, just say that you're an
Yeah.
activist and all. But I knew somewhere deep down inside, these excuses wouldn't work because
Hmm.
I mean anyone can put two and two together. Yeah, so.
Hmm.
Then he took a while. I mean, it was the judgment came out on a Thursday. Friday, Saturday,
Hmm.
Sunday, things were calm. I thought, okay,
Hmm.
yes, so it's finally not going to talk
We've
about it.
forgotten it. Huh.
Yeah. Then but little did I know that was the calm before the storm.
Hmm.
Yeah. So he came up to me and said, he asked me directly on Monday morning, like,
Hmm.
so did you hear there was this All India on that particular day, there was also this opposition-led All India Bandh which was called
Okay.
against rising petrol prices.
Okay.
So he tried to be a little twisted about it. He said, "Did you hear about the Bandh?" And I'm like, yeah, there was a Bandh, and people were protesting. He's like, yeah, did you hear about the town hall event that happened? I'm like, yeah, oh God. So
Okay.
yeah. And then I decided that I would come partially clean. So I told
Hmm.
him, no, that. So I explained to him what that event was. It was, the
Hmm.
decriminalization of 377. And I told him
Hmm.
that I'm very passionate about these causes.
Right. Hmm.
And, one of
But
my
he didn't
friends
buy
is a
it.
lawyer, which is true actually. One of my French class friends
Right.
was a lawyer and an advocate.
Hmm.
And she had come to the celebrations as well.
Hmm.
So I made I like it was half
Sorry.
true, half false. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, but somewhere I knew that he didn't buy it. He's like, okay. Then he came in the evening and he asked me,
Hmm.
but what
Hmm.
were you doing there? You've never been an activist. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And by then my aunt had got caught of those videos as well.
Okay.
Yeah. My aunt has got caught
Relative.
of the videos as well because they were beamed on CNN, IBN, NDTV, etc. Which
Right.
now I think is a really cool thing to talk about to
Hmm.
friends. But then it wasn't. I was like terrified.
Hmm.
I was terrified. And then, of course, once my aunt knew, she made it a big deal. She made it a
Hmm.
huge deal. And my cousin also kind of knew about my sexuality.
Hmm.
And then she kind of broke it to my aunt, who broke it to my father. And I'm like, okay, I
You
think it's
missed the
time.
chance to come out to your dad. Everybody else did that to you. God is disgusting.
Yeah. So, but she didn't tell. I didn't tell my cousin that I was gay exactly. So I told her I was
Okay.
queer. So,
Okay.
so that saving grace was there. So then I told my father, like,
Hmm.
so what they said is true, and I am like gay. I like other men.
Hmm. Hmm.
So then my father's reaction was silent for a bit, and he said, "All that is okay, but why did you embarrass me on national TV?" I'm like, okay. Then he calmed down and said, listen, we can talk about you being gay later, but
Hmm.
you just kind of, of all the ways you could tell me, like you
You
had
had
to
to come
tell
out
me
on
on
TV.
national TV and embarrass yourself. I'm like,
I,
of course I wasn't embarrassed and all after this, but what else could I
hmm.
say? So I just kept quiet, and then uh, next day he came to me and said, "Look, I know people who are gay. Like, I know people who are queer. I know people who are gay. Like,
Hmm.
so I don't see anything wrong." He used an analogy saying that all five fingers are not the same. So
Aw,
yeah, if
that's
I don't
cute.
agree with that analogy, I think it's a bit like twisted in a
But
way.
it's his way of
I know
accepting
it is
you,
way
right?
of interpreting it like so.
Yeah.
He said all five fingers are not the same, so I will accept you. Uh, and he was resentful of the fact that I had told my sister and my
I'm
cousin
not him.
and all my friends basically before telling him. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and he's still a bit rattled by the incident because whenever I bring it up, he's like, "No, TV lalla vanduchu," and all. I'm like, okay, what can
Hmm.
I do about it then? It's not like I chose to come out that way. Oh my God, I didn't even think that
True.
TV cameras were recording me that time. Yeah, yeah. So in a way,
Hmm.
it could have gone really bad if my father wasn't supportive. Could have gone really bad.
Correct.
It worked out okay in the end, so I'm grateful for it. And so I mean I've been talking too much now. A question to Deepthi. So
Okay.
Deepthi, you identify as a
As a lesbian.
AFAB, right? As a lesbian, right?
AFAB lesbian. Yeah.
AFAB lesbian, right? So in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, this
I,
verdict provides leverage to. Okay. Let me put it in a different way. As an AFAB woman, this verdict didn't make a lot of difference to you anyway, technically, if you ask me. Like,
correct.
because of the penile vagina, sorry,
Of the
penal vaginal,
language,
yeah,
of the language around it, and generally, it's it's mostly in like in legal spaces. The discussion is usually around men.
Mm-hmm.
Men men being gay is the wrong thing, or most of the people who were convicted in situations were also men.
Mm.
And yes,
I think
technically you're right
all,
in
all
saying,
either not men or trans, even trans folk would be harassed
correct,
for this. Yeah.
sorry, yeah, men
Yeah.
and trans people have been, you know, taken into custody or whatever by the law. But yes, as such, the law does not even address women's sexuality. But technically, yes. But then that doesn't mean me or any of the other ASAP people that I know of in my space have not been subjected to mental torture because of this. Whether it's parents saying or parents not accepting or saying stuff like, oh, this is not, this is against the law, or this is against the society, this is not natural, and stuff like that are in some way what people draw from the law. And like I was saying earlier, if there is a change in law, society will completely accept it to a certain extent, only maybe in the years to come, depending on the work that is done around it.
Mm.
So, absolutely, although I've not been directly, uh, hurt by the law in any way, but then society doesn't make it easy. It's not easy on the parents, and parents don't make it easy for us.
That's true. That's true. And also, did you feel any sort of solidarity with the community in general, even like that? I mean, you told me about this once, like even though it didn't
Huh.
directly affect me, but you've done a lot of work for the community, and we'll get into more about that later in another session. That would be an interesting podcast in itself, the kind of work Deepthi does for the community,
Yeah.
and but
Yeah,
yeah.
but then, like I was saying, although I was not directly impacted by the law, I have seen, like you mentioned, I did work around, volunteer with groups in Chennai where we have regular meetings, or we have rescue operations, or helping them monetarily, or helping them find jobs, and domestic violence situations. In most of these situations, if some way the situation ends up in, say, for example, a police station,
Mm-hmm.
at grassroots level, the cops still say, "Oh, this is not how this is not how it works. This is not how it should be."
Idu
Whether
namba
maybe
kalacharam illa,
now
like saying it in Tamil, idu
that
namba kalacharam illa. It's not a
yeah
culture.
that
Yeah.
that kalacharam culture thing is like the last thing that comes, right?
Mm.
First thing would be they'll try and say, "Oh, I've heard people tell me we were dragged to the police station. There they told us, this is a national level thing. This doesn't apply to our state." So there are people
Okay.
still trying to twist around words and try out the legal angle first. If that doesn't work, and then they'll be like, it's not our culture. That's the last thing
Mm.
they'll say. You can't embarrass your parents like this.
Mm.
Have you not found a guy like this? So looking at all those experiences and seeing all these people go through the trauma, I think one law will make a lot of difference. Although, like I mentioned, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But at the moment, I think we're headed in the right direction.
Yes, yes, and that's definitely true. And a lot of conversations are now happening, and a lot of companies' D&I policies also are becoming more and more oriented towards LGBTQ, and
Yeah.
yeah, and definitely, like you said, conversations are starting to happen, and this verdict definitely was a trigger. I mean, I use a lot of definitely, but
Yeah.
it was a trigger for all this to happen, and
Yeah.
like you said, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but overall, I mean, this was a welcome sign. And
Yeah.
on that note, we seem to have reached the end of our session. So, any closing points, Deepthi?
Yeah. I think closing, I would say, as you mentioned, conversations have started thanks to the change in the law, and it was not just 2 years ago. We still see, I mean, newspapers have articles about the queer community, even though it's not the Pride Month, and generally in the media as well, there are things popping up here, there, and there is a good amount of good publicity, because there are still newspapers especially the regional ones, which don't have the right tone, don't have the right language, don't care to do it in the right terminology, giving out dead names and stuff like that. So that, as with everything else, there is still work that needs to be done. And when it comes to MNCs and companies, they have started the conversations about creating safe spaces, creating support spaces in their offices, DI initiatives, and somewhere some companies trying to improve their hiring policy. Some are doing it kind of like a token thing, but then it's a start.
It's a start, and as you say,
Yeah.
like any visibility is visibility at the end of the day. Okay.
Yeah, I think for me, I would be the happiest when I see clear topics being discussed at family dinner tables, out in the open. I mean, even with things like sex, it's such a taboo. But then, if it gets to the point where a family is comfortable enough to bring up these topics, whether it's a good angle, bad angle, I mean, as long as there is a balance and people don't literally fight each other, but that would be a good thing. And one last thing I would like to add is that I would love to see more government initiatives where they're trying to educate their government personnel, like from people from health sector, education department, and police department, especially because these are the people in the government hospital or people in the police department. These are the people who sort of directly interact with the people who don't necessarily have the privilege to reach out to an NGO or have the right language even to know where to go.
Yeah,
These,
language is
I think,
important.
yeah, I mean, I didn't know the term lesbian till like I was about, I don't know, 17 or 18. So there is no regional version of these words, and there's already so much negativity. So I think they are the ones who need to be, these grassroots people are the people who need the most help, and people who are in regular touch with them are to be sensitized.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you. And I'm not going to give any suggestions yet. That could be at in
Right.
another podcast or something. But I just like to take the example of education. I agree with you, Deepti. Sensitization is a must. Now it's like pretty clearly established that there are multiple, cross-cutting gender and sexual identities, which uh, which start affecting or taking place in an individual right from their childhood, and schools need to be more sensitive and aware about these issues. And as we know, schooling, especially, I mean, I can give my own example. Schooling contributes immensely to the formative stages of an individual's
Definitely.
personality, and issues like gender awareness, sex education, uh, an introduction to LGBT plus topics need to be introduced at the school level. Now there is a lot of talk about the NEP which makes mention about this,
Hmm.
and even some other schools that have their own gender and sexuality sensitization programs. But I personally feel a lot more effort needs to be uh, a lot more effort needs to go into this. There could be multiple ways to do it, and probably discuss it next time. But yeah, I mean, I just gave the example of education.
Yeah.
So I think I am done for today, Deepti.
Okay. So that would be a wrap for today. So hope we managed to educate and entertain you without rambling. We started it like a very random thing. We hope to do it on a weekly basis. So do watch out for the space for our next episode. Take care, stay safe, mask up, and stay hydrated.
Au revoir.